And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather for Wednesday morning, showing IFR out here over the southeast Bering Sea to the Alaska Peninsula associated with the storminess out in that area. Marginal VFR for the entire Aleutian chain northward there toward the Bering Strait, but mainly across St. Lawrence Island and into the southwest here, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, VFR Bristol Bay, marginal VFR Kodiak Island, and then up across western Cook Inlet and the eastern slopes of the Alaska Range all the way over toward Windy Pass. More marginal VFR up here over the or along and just south of the Yukon River area, and also for the North Slope and the Arctic coast into the Gulf of Alaska. Good VFR Copper River Basin, 40-mile country right on down the southeast coast. And for the afternoon, marginal VFR continues for the panhandle here as the marginal VFR retreats back to the west a little bit, staying just south of Yakutat along the North Gulf Coast into areas of Prince William Sound and the eastern Kenai Peninsula, and still up over western Cook Inlet toward Windy Pass. VFR southeast interior, a couple areas of marginal VFR here, Yukon Flats, and then along the lower Yukon River Valley area. Also from the North Slope to the Arctic coast, IFR up into Kodiak Island, and also IFR here, mostly off the coast over the eastern Bering Sea, but definitely right over the Pribilof Islands. And then next batch of IFR with the next system approaching Shimianatu, and that'll slide eastward here into the central Aleutians for Thursday morning. Still looking at IFR here over the Bering Sea, mostly off the coast except over the Pribilof St. Matthew Island. Marginal VFR St. Lawrence Island, good VFR in the interior here. Marginal VFR for the Arctic coast. IFR, Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, right on up into Kamishak Bay, and possibly up to about Port Moller there for the Kenai Peninsula. Marginal VFR into Resurrection Bay and central and western Prince William Sound, but Cook Inlet here on up into the Copper River Basin, Susitna Valley, Matanuska Valley, staying VFR, as well as the southeast coast. And for the afternoon, VFR holding there for the panhandle. Conditions starting to come down a little bit here as this moisture shifts northward. So we've got IFR along the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula and possibly into Kachemak Bay, definitely over Kamishak Bay, down across into Kodiak Island. Good VFR in the interior, all the way up across the Brooks Range, north slope to the Arctic coast, a little marginal. And some IFR just south of St. Lawrence Island here. And more IFR over the western and southwest Bering Sea, but that area north of the Aleutians here, kind of a split in that frontal boundary there. And icing just grazing the east central Aleutian areas. And for passes, Sandatoof and Canadigan for, excuse me, Wednesday morning, or for Wednesday, occasional marginal VFR for both passes throughout the day. Occasionally marginal also for Lake Clark and Merrill, especially on the eastern entrances. Same forecast for rainy, occasionally marginal. Windy, marginal VFR at times throughout the day, but we'll go optimistically VFR for Isabel. More likely VFR from Antasta and Tanita looking good. VFR for that pass as well. Portage, marginal VFR, especially on the eastern entrance. And for Chilkoot and White, VFR. And for the freezing levels here, about 2,000 feet tomorrow morning across southern Alaska, 4,000 to 6,000 feet across the Panhandle, and 2,000 feet south of the Alaska Peninsula Aleutians out to the west. And for icing, big area of heavier icing out here, just beginning to come onto the chart there, but staying west of Shimianatu through tomorrow afternoon. No icing in the Bering Sea, possible areas of light Haisley and moderate rime icing here over the southwest interior, right on up into the Alaska Range, maybe the Kuskokwim Valley, into the Kenai Peninsula, and then scattering out up to the northeast here across the 40-mile country Yukon Flats area, and maybe a little bit of icing threats there for the southern southeast coast. Looking at the jet stream, northwest flow here over the eastern Gulf of Alaska off the southeast coast, 65 to 90 knots. And pretty light over the interior, as well as the eastern and northern Bering Sea. Stronger flow down here along the Aleutians there from varying directions. Mostly northwest, 120 knots there for the Adak-Atka area. 9,000 feet, low pressure in toward the western Alaska Peninsula. Southeast winds 40 knots along the southwest coast into Bristol Bay, about 35 across Kodiak Island. Another wind max, 35 knot southeast winds here, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, light to the north, and light variable winds for the southeast coast. Same thing at 3,000 feet, high pressure here, keeping the winds light and variable from the southeast and eastern interior areas all the way down toward Dixon Entrance. Strongest winds here, southeast 35 to 45 knots from the Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island, maybe southern Cook Inlet along the southwest coastal areas there, Bristol Bay to Nunivak Island. And stronger winds with that next big storm, but staying out to the west at least through tomorrow afternoon. Otherwise, east winds up to 35 knots there for both the Bering Strait, western Seward Peninsula, and the western Arctic coast. And throw some isolated moderate turbulence there for the Bering Strait up to Kivalina and the western Brooks Range area, as well as the Arctic coast. Same thing here for maybe some considerable moderate turbulence there for the lee side of the Aleutian Range there, King Salmon, Igigik, and those areas. Light to isolated moderate for Kodiak Island, Togiak Bay, out to Nunivak Island, and turbulence on the increase there for Shimi and Attu, but pretty good for the remainder of the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Smooth for the southeast coast.